Welcome. Welcome to New Light Living Podcast. I'm Ulrika Sullivan. I'm an intuitive spiritual life coach and a galactic astrologer. Today, I have this amazing guest with me, Cassandra DeAnn. I was having a conversation with Cassandra, and I learned that she's into the gene keys, she's into the human design, and she's into astrology. So it's like, yes, let's have her on this podcast. And today we're going to focus on the gene keys and as an energy system, but specifically also the Venus sequence. And some of you may be familiar with the gene keys already, but of course, we're going to learn a lot together here from Cassandra today, and specifically around how we can work with the Venus sequence, which is based on the word, focused on Venus, beauty, relationships, heart-centered energy. So why not just dive into this? And before we do that, I'd love to welcome you, Cassandra, here. Why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. And before I get into that, I just want to say, thank you so much, Rika, for having me on your show. I've loved everything I've heard you share, and you just inspire me when it comes to astrology. So I'm looking forward to our talk today about the gene keys. So a little bit about me. So I am married. I have a teenager, live out in the country, and I am a certified human design reader and a gene keys guide. I have studied for quite some time astrology. As a matter of fact, I experienced a spontaneous awakening that actually took place on a solar eclipse. So that astrology was my very first love that kind of propelled me into this journey of where I am today. My biggest passion and why I do the things I do is really I aspire to help individuals unlock their authentic expression and to really just come into who they are, give themselves permission to just to be present, and to enjoy this whole earth school experience that we are here to journey through. So that's a little bit about me. I think the only other thing I'd add to that is I am a crazy cat person. I love cats, have three, and yeah, so that's an important fact about me to share as well.
Great, thank you. That makes us two. I have two cats
Oh,
as
yay.
well. So yeah, lovely. So I want to ask you this first before we go into anything about the gene keys as an energy system itself. Why, Cassandra, do you feel that um, you know unlocking our heart or self-love or really getting in touch with that inner energy of which is really represented in the Venus sequence here. Why is it relevant to even talk about in the terms of the gene keys? Like, I'd love to hear your opinion on that, or your view of why is it relevant?
Absolutely. And before I answer that question, I'm going to add a little piece to this to just say up front that when we are looking at unlocking the heart and, connecting to that inner self, in my experience and my spiritual journey, the gene keys was where I received the most transformation, and specifically the Venus sequence. I can still remember the first time I heard a audio from Richard Rudd, the founder of Gene Keys, and he was talking about the art of contemplation. And in this meditation, he was encouraging you to just be present and to acknowledge how your body feels, to recognize the shadows that come up, and to just allow them and to look at them with gentleness and with more of a like you would look at a child expressing a concern. And that is so heart-centered and kind and loving and nurturing to be able to give ourselves that sort of gift. And I found in my experience that this was the key. This was the key to unlocking and to really getting into the healing work that needed to be done, because it wasn't until I could look at my experiences, my journeys, my trials in a new perspective of love and compassion that I was able to move forward. So often in life, I feel like we are quicker to try to beat ourselves up about it, or to repress it, or try to act like it's fine. But rarely do we sit with ourselves and allow our heart to speak to us, and to treat it with such compassion that allows us to get into this deep work, because the Venus sequence is deep work.
Yes, I love everything you said there. Yeah, the vehicle is really our own commitment to ourselves and to create that space. Yeah, exactly what you're saying. So yeah, because otherwise, like, what do we do with all that insight?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you opening with reminding us all that for any change to happen, it really is not just the knowledge that we need to have, but actually to make it into an art. It's to give us ourselves that space. So yeah, within ourselves. So love that. Love that. Yeah, and before if there's anyone that's not really familiar with the gene keys or the Venus sequence, which is a certain part of the gene keys, tell us a little bit about what actually is the gene keys, and also what is the Venus sequence, so that we kind of square away the terminology first.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. So, as I had mentioned, I am a certified human design reader. So, I started there, which has helped me in understanding the gene keys, because when we're looking at the gene keys, human design was sort of the precursor. So, the human design system is taking different astrological placements to formulate a chart, and the gene keys uses a variety of these same placements in developing their chart. So let me just back up a hair and say, when we're talking about human design first, is we're looking at a system. I love that you used energetic system, because it's exactly that. And it's based off of the I Ching, the Kabbalah tree of life, the Hindu chakra system, and a whole lot of astrology. And so when you pull your chart, you need the same information you would to pull, say, your natal chart, which is your date of birth, the exact time of birth, and location of birth. When you do this, the chart that comes, you have astrology listed at birth, and you have astrology listed approximately 3 months prior to birth. And this side that's 3 months prior to birth is what is considered more of the unconscious or the subconscious. And this is absolutely ties in when we look into the gene keys and where these specific placements are coming from. So Gene Keys was brought to the world by Richard Rudd, who actually followed the founder of human design for quite some time, and to the point where the universe sort of gave him his own unique download of information that kind of used components of human design, but it was a completely different energetic system altogether. It's very nurturing and esoteric and has this yin quality about it that I absolutely love. So the Venus sequence is a part of what is called the golden path. Richard has his own particular, let's say, we'll call them journeys that you can go on of self discovery. And so there is the activation sequence, which is a lot about understanding the four pillars that make you who you are. There's the Venus sequence, which gets into, as we talked about, unlocking the heart, self-love, and relationships, and how relationships tie into that journey. And then there's the Pearl, which is more around the theme of manifestation, or finding a sense of fulfillment in the world. So these paths each have unique essences to them. All are wonderful and beautiful. And it is a journey of self-discovery. These paths are best experienced through self-reflection and contemplation within yourself. So today, what we're going to be talking about with the Venus sequence, it's essentially a combination of various spheres, they're called, but because your audience is very familiar with astrology, I'll just say different points between the conscious and the subconscious placements of the Earth, the Moon, and Venus and Mars. So those are the placements that we'll be looking at and diving into when we look into the Venus sequence.
Yes, I love that you brought up the fact that it's actually taken also into account prior to birth, which
Mm-hmm.
the energy is not just like it's taking into account our multidimensional self, which I
Mm-hmm.
love to address, of course, but it's yeah. And what you're saying here too is really, really important. It's very easy to get technical, right, with this and say, okay, just because I have a certain profile, and it's similar with astrology, just because I have a certain profile or something is interpreted a certain way given to us, right? Because it's interpreted through, let's say, Richard Rudd to begin with, but the importance of translating that for ourselves. What does this insight that this energy system, or any energy system such as human design or astrology or the gene keys, what that really is a translation within ourselves to become our truth. It's very easy. I see sometimes these systems being really taken literally.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you brought that up, that it's really the contemplation and the work, the inner work that we do on our own to
Yeah.
translate those insights that we gain by this journey of self-discovery that these systems can provide, right?
Yeah. So the Venus sequence, if you don't have a chart, I would highly suggest to go to the Gene Keys site.
Here's mine.
Yeah. Yay. To go to the Gene Keys site and pull your free profile. This is, Richard offers amazing information and insights in there that just that alone has value to it, and it's free, so why not, so when you're looking at the chart, you're looking at the red spheres is the Venus sequence. And if you pull up the full golden path, you'll probably notice that some of the spheres, such as the purpose listed on the very bottom of the chart, has two colors. This means that it is a part of both the whatever color it is, such as for the purpose, it's part of the activation sequence and the Venus sequence. And when you take the golden path, whichever journey you're on, they have different interpretations and meanings and reflections that you consider. So we'll start with the purpose when we're considering it through the lens of the Venus sequence. So when we're looking at purpose, this is essentially, this sphere is bringing awareness to the fact that everybody that comes in our path and comes in contact with us is in some way or another magnetically drawn to us to help us on our journey to connecting with or feeling that sense of purpose. So it would be the purpose sphere. Now, when we move up and we get to the attraction sphere, let me go back real quick. I'm sorry. For the purpose sphere, what we're looking at there is the on the design side, or the unconscious, which is 3 months prior to birth, location of the earth. So that is the placement for that. Sorry, I missed that. Next, going to the attraction sphere, we're looking at the design, which is once again 3 months prior to birth, the moon placement of this. And when we consider the moon in human design, there's also an added layer of the moon is here to, it's what helps drive or motivate us as well. That's something that human design adds that layer to it. I believe when Richard Rudd refers to the attraction sphere with this, he talks a lot about more of the darker side of the moon, our desires, and sexuality is associated with this sphere. So this sphere, what it does is it is our mystical magnetic force that sort of draws people towards us for the purpose of transformation. And in the Venus sequence, one of the things I love Richard talks about is he encourages commitment in relationships. So often, we get in relationships and we think, oh, I need to, cut that person off, cut this off. And Richard has the theory that he shared that if we look at our more challenging relationships with a more broader, open perspective, what we might find is what's being triggered is exactly the things that we're meant to heal, evolve, and go through. So, of course, I'm never condoning, any situations of domestic violence or anything like that. But for most people, when we look at relationships, the attraction sphere is literally calling in, bring us in the people that are causing and helping us to go through these experiences to bring transformation. That's not always negative. That could be eye-opening and insightful, but it's here to bring some sort of change. The next sphere we're looking at is the IQ. And this is connected to the intellect, and this is the personality Venus. Now, when we get to the next few spheres, what we're looking at is each one of these is associated with a wound. And when we talk about unlocking the heart, and when we talk about self-love, the thing is about the Venus sequence, like we talked about in the beginning, it's that willingness to go on these journeys, to heal, evolve. When we come out of that victim mindset and when we expand and transform, it's then that we are able to offer our highest expression of love. So this is also, the Venus sequence can be kind of looked at as your personal wound map. And when we start at the IQ, we're starting at the wound that has been implanted or developed around the ages of 14 to 21. And the IQ sphere, this wound, is a lot around how we think, what we tell ourselves, our mental blocks. And we're designed to go through this journey of self-reflection, because the next sphere on the other side is the EQ, which is associated with the emotions. So with this, we have to get through that first initial reprogramming of what we tell ourselves and how we think, to be able to really get to that added depth of the emotional maturity we're looking for. And I'll add a personal note here that this was where I had the absolute most transformation in my life. And since your listeners appreciate astrology, in my chart, I have the gate for this is it's called 20 and it's the line 5. This is my Venus on my personality. So that's astrology at birth, Venus sign, located in Gemini in the 8th house. So 8th house transformation, death, rebirth. Okay, so this one really hit home. So what this meant for me. So the 20, when we're looking at the gate 20, this is all about contemplation, being present in the now, be allowing yourself to be this desire to live and feel this moment, to not be caught in the past or worry about the expectations of the present, but to just be here right now. Now, unfortunately, some of the shadow expression of this is a sense of detachment. It's a sense of feeling like, you're not feeling present. You're not feeling sort of lightened up by life. And it can have this essence of just following the status quo, kind of not being present. In Gene Keys, they also talk about this as superficiality, in the sense of getting caught up in that 3D realization of the world, that material realm of existence, and not looking beyond that. And with this, you can also, when we look at it from the Gene Keys perspective, I have this as the 5th line, which represents the practical mind. The shadow of this can be distorting the facts and seeing things, reality, as distorted. You can be over dramatic. I can remember there would be times in my life with my husband, and we would get in an argument, and he would say something to me, and he would always scratch his head and say, "How on earth did you get here from there?" Because my insecurity, because that's a big part of this line too, and this gate is coming to self-assurance. The 20 and the gift in Gene Keys is self-assurance. But with my inadequacy and my lower vibrational, shadow self running the show, I always, everything got distorted because I saw myself as distorted and awful and, all of these things. So it was hard for him to carry on conversations with me because my perspective of reality was so distorted from my own lack of sense of self and understanding. So the gift of this, however, is coming back to recognizing, being in the present moment, embracing life for not just the material essence of things, but that deeper sense of purpose, and stepping into that. Another shadow on this for me was being busy all the time, because that's another way you can distract yourself from being in the moment and not dealing with the things you should be self-reflecting on, And so this was a hard one for me. And there was a lot of self-reflection too. It brought up triggers with wounding from my mother as well, because this was something I could say was a generational thing that I kind of was feeling I was clearing for myself. So that was a powerful one. And yeah.
What was the impact since you gained that insight about yourself? Like when you first started to get insights from, let's say, the Gene Keys around this, what has the impact been in your relationship? I'm just curious.
Oh my gosh, so much. I mean, so much. These were just a few of the spheres that I listed. There's so many more. And for each one, when I was going through this, I had very powerful, I've grown to understand that, trauma and things get stored in the body. So I don't want listeners to feel like, oh dear Lord, there were not everyone hit so hard. I mean, like I said, this was in my 8th house and Venus is my chart ruler. So there was obviously, yep, that was the one.
Yeah.
So there was a lot to do with that, but it has caused so much transformation in my life, so much transformation in my relationships and these realizations. And I talked about with the last one, self-assurance being, a challenge. And I have gone to see such transformation in my marriage even. And my husband pulled me aside one day and we had done something for the weekend. And he said to me, Cassandra, he says, you have appeared to be the most selfless you've ever been in your life. And I said, wow, that's really interesting, because actually the things that I did were coming from a place where I felt permission to care about how I felt and make that decision without worrying about so many expectations. But in the past, things would be like, well, I have to do this because if I don't do that, then they're going to be upset at me. And I guess I'm going to have to, and I would do things, but we can't hide that. We can't hide that shadow. You can't live that way and it not be energetically felt by those around you. And so I joke that, being insecure, being the people pleaser has been the most selfish thing I've done in my journey. And as I've healed and grown, it's allowed me to unlock my heart, to be more loving, to give myself permission to be here in this space, just like anybody else has permission to be in that space. And by learning and healing through the things that, like I brought up the example of my mother and different things, when we're holding on to these shadows, we're always filtering our circumstances through it. So until we heal and evolve from them, then we're always going to be considering and bringing them in as players in that experience and that journey, where when we heal, we detach and we can love and appreciate ourselves, and we can love and admire and appreciate somebody else, and then be able to cohabitate and interact together without all of the mucky stuff clouding.
Yeah. What a beautiful, absolutely beautiful example of transformation. And, from now on, or from that place, reaching for a higher, energy, if you will, in that interaction, for example, with your husband. So beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
So the EQ comes after the IQ. And this is the personality Mars. So the Mars at birth. This is the wound from 7 to 14. I touched on earlier that we're looking at emotional maturity. So when we're looking at this, we're on a journey looking at how we express ourselves emotionally. The next one is the SQ. And this is the spiritual component, and it's associated with our design, Venus. So this is the Venus 3 months prior to birth. And this is the wounding that took place from the first 7 years. When we're looking at what this sphere means, it's kind of calling to the spiritual heart, or the essence, that original child that is connected to, all the spiritual, purity, I guess you could say. So this kind of is like a call to an inner essence of our spiritual service and higher purpose. And then we come to the core wound. And the core wound is the the big one. It's the one from birth. So this is right from the get go, a big journey that will be a part of your life. This is called the sacred wound as well. And this is associated with the unconscious or the design Mars. So you can also look at this as when we're looking at an unconscious Mars, we can look at Mars needing to mature, or evolve over time. And so this is essentially kind of like the hero's journey. It's when you start off, this is going to be a big essence of what you're here to navigate. And then when you get into the pearl sequence, this becomes the vocation. So it's kind of like when we go through the things and we learn what comes next. We're here to share them. You went through them for a reason, and now you share that wisdom with the world. And so, yeah, those are the different spheres of the Venus sequence.
I love it. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you for that beautiful go through, because sometimes it's difficult, like, where do I start with this? And we wonder kind of, what does this all represent? Because I get a lot of questions too sometimes, like, how do I use this? So thank you for this go through. It gives us some information on what each of these areas, or within, it's actually energy within ourselves.
Yep.
So that's how I translate it. It's all part of who we are, and it's important to kind of have that foundation, if you will. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Now, there's a lot we could talk about next, because but what I'm curious about, and if I put myself in somebody else's shoes too, it all comes back to what you said in the beginning, that willingness to go on a journey of self-discovery. So let's say somebody has pulled their chart and start to read or take in information about each of these spheres that you just mentioned. What is the next step? Or not step, but like, how, I'm curious as to your experience in how to actually experience this system. Because now we're taking it from learning a lot of things, right, into the space of what I call, we go from learning to wisdom. How do we create wisdom with this system and this?
The gene keys are a wonderful energetic system, but in reflection of sharing them with the world, Richard has shared from a contemplation on Gene Keys 60 that says the systems, the energetic systems that we have are great. They help us bring out the information to the world, but we always have to come back and remember our essence and our multidimensionality. And so while they're great to allow us to digest and proceed, we always want to be mindful, not to be too dogmatic, and to allow these energetic systems and these things to speak to us. And there's no right or wrong way of doing it. So would I say that the best way would be if you were someone in a position that you could, let's say, purchase the Venus sequence and go through all of the steps? Because in addition to all the spheres, in between each one is a pathway. There's meditations. There's so much content there. Would I say that that's a really good way? Yes, I would. Is that the only way? No, it is not. So you can, if you're wanting to bring out the wisdom of what this has to offer you, first thing I would say is meditation. Sit in meditation. Pull your chart. You can sit in meditation and you can just put the intention out there. What do I need to know? What would you like me to explore? And you could intuitively begin your journey of contemplation for each of these. I talked about the IQ's intellect. I talked about the EQ's emotion. the SQ is spiritual, the core wound is a sacred wound. Maybe one of these things stood out to you. Start there. That's your intuition guiding you towards those journeys of transformation. But I would say that most of my realizations came from the willingness to sit down and ask myself the questions, to listen to my heart. So if you heard nothing else from this, podcast episode today, that is one of the most important things. By opening that door, the wisdom will come, the experiences will come, the journeys will come. And if you don't mind, I know I've taken a peek at your chart. Would you mind if I shared a couple of the things? Feel
free. I'm curious.
Awesome. One thing I wanted to mention that was kind of cool. We'll start off a little lighter. I know I mentioned for me the IQ was a big journey, because we talked a lot about that. I'll just kind of mentioned, I noticed in your chart, you have the 31-2 here. And so the 31, I'm not going to say I favor any of the 64 gates, but I do favor some of them. I've got a couple handfuls of them that I admire. I don't have many of them, but the 31 I really love, because this is all about influence. But why I love this is because the leadership quality that it offers isn't like the 7, which in human design, the gate 7 is on the other side of this channel. The 7 is the army leader. So its way of authority is saying, this is what I need you to do, where the 31 on the other end, I look at as more of the yin expression of that. So this says influence. This says, these are things that I feel would greatly benefit you, but you're going to need to show up for yourself. Here are some steps you can take. So it's leadership through that yin nurturing quality of, this would be good, but you have to do the other part. And so I love this. And so when we look at the IQ here, this can have various different expressions. I know we've only chatted a few times. I don't know too much about you personally, but one of the ways you could look at this, if someone was to have this, when it's related to the IQ, which is the intellect or the way we think, this could mean perhaps early in life, feeling like you suppressed that wisdom, you suppressed that leadership capability, you suppressed your expression or your opinions, maybe, whether feeling inadequate, or for whatever reason, maybe not feeling heard. But this could be maybe because it's intellect and things we tell ourselves. It could be, well, they're better to talk about that than me. They know what they're talking more than I would about this subject. And that's not accurate. That 31 wants to come out. And this, on the other flip side of that, could be, either that, or you can be the child that really wants to tell everybody, how they should be doing life. So that could be the other end of it. And the neat thing about the line 2 here is it says that you have a highly expressive and creative mind. And so that is one of the gift potentials that you have with that. And then the other thing I notice is, let me tell you, that 9.5, that 9 line 5, it gets you twice in your chart. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the gate 9, but I definitely would spend some time in contemplation on that there. But generally speaking, we can look at 9 is an individual that has a great ability to kind of complete things through steps. They have an eye for detail and can be methodical. It's like if you picture yourself, I want to get from here to there instead of jumping there. The nine has a gift for taking one step at a time, one step at a time, and allowing things to progress in that sense. So this can also mean sometimes that you may take to or enjoy things that are allow you to take one step at a time, one bite at a time, going through. So the fifth line here is a lot about guilt and forgiveness. So I talked about this is one of those spheres that has two expressions. So for example, when we're looking at your activation sequence, the fifth line is the management, it's the promoter, it's guiding others. But to get there through the Venus sequence, we go through healing processes. So, this is it can be have an essence of feeling guilty for honoring your own truth, and ability to sort of forgive ourselves. When we talked about how sometimes in the beginning I talked about beating ourselves up for things, or holding on to things, or wishing we did things differently. And so with this, it kind of has that quality. So those are just a few things, but there are so many different expressions and options for each one of these gates and lines. So it is definitely good to take time for contemplation and meditation and just really play with them for yourself and see what they mean for you.
Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
this was a beautiful example of how someone can learn about themselves. And you definitely hit the, head on the nail there for me personally. So thank you for that. And it all is a journey, right? And
Yeah.
we can
Mm-hmm.
always learn. I learned something new about myself today from you. So thank you. We're
Oh,
never really fully discovered, right? And
yeah.
yeah, I love that insights like this can be it's a lifelong journey we're on,
Mm.
but
Yes.
also we're coming back to knowing who we truly are, our true
Yes.
essence, that it's insights that really are speaking to that. And I love the gene keys and its ways of reaching for a higher vibration with the shadow, the gift, and the city.
Mm-hmm.
It has like
Yes.
three levels of energy, if you will, within each. So it's a very it's a very visionary system as well for those who want to expand
Absolutely.
and reach for a higher frequency. So yeah, and thank you for that, bringing that little personal touch to it. I appreciate it. So, Cassandra, if somebody is listening and watching here today and it's like, yes, I want to try this. I want to, of course, you gave great guidance on how to get your free chart. But if somebody wants to take the first step, what would you recommend? Like,
I am a Gene Keys guide. I like to guide through the process. So, when I offer the wisdom of Gene Keys, often it's through a reflection of the full chart with the energetic system of human design and astrology as well. So I do think that getting that chart would be a great way. You're more than welcome to also follow, if you wanted to follow my podcast. I know I share a lot of information there, and that is somewhere that you can kind of get into some of that uh, mix of information as well. There, but yeah, I really think that pulling the chart and considering possibly doing the golden path, the Venus sequence through the Gene Keys website, which I can give a link if you wanted to put that in the show description, where listeners can check that
yes.
out. Yeah.
What's the name of your podcast, Cassandra?
Things I talk about. You may have noticed I like to talk. Um,
Yes. And what's your website? Because I really want people to come
yeah.
visit you on
Yes.
your podcast and or on your website. What's your
Yeah.
website?
So my website is my name, CassandraDeAnn.com. And as of this weekend, I now have on my website the ability to pull a free human design chart. So you can pull a human design chart there. And, if that interests you, we can definitely kind of talk more,
Yeah, yeah, everyone
in my
go and check
readings.
out.
Yeah.
Go pull a chart from
Yeah.
Cassandra's website. Yes. Any
Awesome.
other last pieces or nuggets of wisdom that you want to share with everyone today, based on what we've talked about? Unlocking your heart, using the gene keys for as a source of inspiration and information, and translating that into your own wisdom. What would you leave people with at the end of this episode today?
I think that where we started was one of the most powerful things. Just to kind of go back with that is when it comes to ourselves, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to the fullest expression of our heart, and knowing who we are. It starts off with gentleness, I would say, compassion and gentleness. And I know, at a time, my husband once said to me, Cassandra, a lot of people aren't willing to do this sort of work. We get busy, we get caught up into life and things. And as long as we do that, like I talked about, my IQ, that 20, busy in a way, we can't get there until we pause. And so if you're not in a place to even contemplate, the gene keys or the Venus sequence yet, just try to be present in little ways throughout your day. Start there. That's always a good step. When you're in the car and you're stuck in traffic, instead of being frustrated, take a couple deep breaths, check in with your heart, check in with your body, finding little ways, that you can do this. Walk outside, take 3 deep breaths, notice the air, the trees, nature. Finding ways to do this is a great way to start opening that door to going on these deeper journeys of self-reflection.
So much wisdom right there. Thank you so much for being on New Light Living podcast, Cassandra.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. New Light Living will be back soon with another episode. So thank you very much. Bye, everyone.